A UK ruthless killer planned the perfect murder, and everything was set perfectly in place for the kill. However, after the bloodshed, the crime scene was left with more clues than the killer anticipated. This is the case of the Eastenders killer. Hello there and welcome back to the dark side of reality, folks. My name is Lloyd, and right now you're watching When Evil Follows. This week's case takes us to the Midlands in Nottingham, in England, home to the legend that is Robin Hood, and also the creator of Batman's closely inspired Gotham Village. And that's pretty cool. Sir Paul McCartney's first gig was also held in Nottingham, and Nottingham is also the 15th largest city within the UK, and including its metropolitan borough areas, its population count is around 1.7 million people, and that count continues to grow with every single passing year. And this case takes place in a small town called Arnold in Nottingham, and the year is 2011. The Bartlam family were a cute little family of four: mother Jacqueline, known to most as Jaqcui, and father Adrian. Their oldest was called Daniel, and the youngest of the family was Dominic. Everything was going so splendidly for the Bartlam family. Jaqcui was well liked by all who knew her, and the same could be said for Adrian as well, who would completely dote on his loving family. Both boys were raised with love and had a close relationship with their father, Adrian, who would at weekends spend much time playing football with the children and other family fun activities. And by all means, they really did seem to be a very loving, happy family. They cared about each other, and they were financially comfortable and free from financial worry, so much so they could afford to send their children to a private school in order to maximise their education and social development. Yeah, these kids, they had the best, great schooling, they were happy, they were brought up in a nice home. However, by 2005, both Jaqcui and Adrian would struggle to get along with each other as their relationship became much more complex. They would often fall out with each other over the smallest and trivial matters that would often transform into huge and serious arguments within the family home. And so by doing what they both believed was best for the children, they decided to separate and file for divorce, leaving Jaqcui with more or less full custody of both of the children, with the understanding that Adrian could see the children every other weekend. So that just left Jaqcui at home with the two children to try and rebuild a steadier, more stable lifestyle moving forwards. However, in 2008, Jaqcui went on a date with a new fellow named Simon Matters, and their relationship started to blossom. Jaqcui was really taken in by Simon's charms, and they really hit it off. And soon, they both fell in love. Simon's relationship with the children was a brilliant one. He was great. He was kind and understanding and supportive to Jaqcui, and he really did make such an effort with the children. And he honestly gave those kids everything with all the love in the world. He treated those children like his own, and that's exactly how it should be. Jaqcui really loved Simon, and he loved her, and their relationship grew from strength to strength. So much so, Simon would eventually end up spending all of his free time in and around the family house. He was a proud, loving stepfather figure to both of the boys, and the boys, they really liked him. And given the fact that both kids were still seeing their real father each and every other weekend, there wasn't any real unwanted complications. I say this because it's always going to be hard for any children to accept their new parents' lover in the family home, especially when the separation is still quite fresh in their hearts and minds. And so it's got to be somewhat challenging for children in these similar circumstances. But these two kids seem to get on with the family change really well. Simon continued to pay the upkeep for his own house in Yorkshire, and once a month he would drive to his own property just to make sure that everything was above board and okay, and that there was no damage caused by burglars or anything like that. However, as I mentioned earlier, Simon was more with the family unit than not. Simon would drive to Yorkshire for work, whilst Jaqcui was very supportive for his working needs, and she was used to Simon working away on certain weekends of each month. It was an Easter weekend when Simon was driving to work up in the Yorkshire Dales. Now, he was really missing Jaqcui and the boys, and so he sent her a text message saying, "I hope you and the kids are okay. I miss you all like crazy." And what are your plans for this holiday weekend? Jaqcui responded back saying that she's taking both of the boys over to their grandmother's to enjoy Easter break with the family. This was followed with "I love you and I'll see you again tomorrow. Kiss kiss." And so the next day, in just 2 hours before Simon was due to leave work, he heard on the radio that there's been a serious house fire within the Nottingham area. He was a tad bit concerned at this point, and so he sent a text message to Jaqcui's phone saying, "I'm setting off soon from work, I hope you're all okay, I'll see you later." But Jaqcui didn't respond back. Simon had now left work and he was on his driving route back to home whilst listening to the radio, and that's when the news updates gave further information on the location of the house fire in Nottingham, accurately stating that the fire was in Arnold, Nottingham. And it was by this time Simon was completely overturned with worry, as he knew that's where his girlfriend Jaqcui and her 2 boys lived. And so yeah, he rung Jaqcui's phone hoping to hear her voice and just to know that everything's okay. But Jaqcui's phone just continued to ring and ring and ring, and eventually automatic voicemail picked up the call. Now still gripped with worry, he decided to send another text message to Jaqcui's phone saying that he was on his way and for her to text him back as soon as she receives this message, so he knows that everyone's okay. And after an hour or so, he looks down at his phone and yeah, once again there's still no reply from Jaqcui. And that was when the radio then gave further news and updates of the house fire in Nottingham, this time specifically stating the updated location of the house fire was Georgia Drive, the same street where Jaqcui and her 2 boys live on. And as soon as Simon heard this news on the radio, he felt adrenaline surging throughout his body, as he was now racing to Jaqcui's house as quick as he possibly could. Simon reported feeling this overwhelming sense of dread, and that his intuition was telling him all the while that something wasn't right. And by the time he eventually did arrive at Jaqcui's house, you know, his worst nightmare was finally confirmed. Jaqcui's home was burnt to ashes from the inside out, and the property was completely overcome with fire and smoke, and the property was completely destroyed, with police tape blocking off all surrounding areas leading into the property. Simon stepped out of his car and was immediately approached by police officers, only to be told that his partner Jaqcui, unfortunately, she didn't make it out alive, and that the property is also under police investigation, as the property wasn't safe either. Luckily, however, both children did manage to survive the awful ordeal, as Daniel Bartlam, who was only 14 years old, noticed the flames inside the house but couldn't reach his mum's bedroom, as the flames were too big and the heat was far too intense. And so Daniel bravely ran into his brother's bedroom and pulled Dominic out over his shoulder and carried him outside of the burning building to safety. Daniel then raced back inside the burning house and rescued the family dog, but sadly Jaqcui's life, it couldn't be saved. In Daniel's statement to the police, he mentioned he did all he could do, which was just stand there with his 6-year-old little brother whilst watching the flames take control of his home. And as the flames blazed through the window, followed by thick black smoke, the only thing on their minds was their mother Jaqcui, who was trapped inside the house, was now burning to death. And when you think about it, these 2 kids have just lived through a terrible, life-changing and most tragic nightmare, one that will no doubt haunt them for the rest of their lives. They both more or less have just witnessed their mum burn to death, and that's more than enough for a 14-year-old and a 6-year-old to deal with. It was a very sad and tragic event. A local neighbour, watching on from the other side of the street in absolute terror and horror, quickly rang the emergency services, and shortly after, fire engines and ambulances and police arrived at the scene. The fire services managed to gain control over the flames pretty quickly, and that's when they discovered the body believed to have been 47-year-old mother of 2, Jaqcui Bartlam. Her body was found in bed, and her body was burnt beyond all recognition, and because her body was found in bed, firefighters believed that it was most likely that Jaqcui was overcome by the smoke first and then fell victim to the flames. It was a tragic moment, as Jaqcui's lifeless body was then taken to the morgue. The emergency services and neighbours all watched on in sadness, but all recognised how fast and brave Daniel's actions were, as everyone hailed young Daniel as a hero. This 14-year-old boy had managed to save his own life, and then managed to carry out his younger brother from the flames, and then raced back into the danger zone and saved the family dog as well. Like, the guy is like a mini Superman. The police were fully aware that both of these children didn't have a sole carer, as Jaqcui was no longer alive. They also needed to establish the main cause of the house fire and how the fire was started, and so the family dog was taken in by a kind and friendly neighbour, and both the children were taken to the police station. Once at the police station, Daniel and Dominic were given a large hot chocolate drink and some warm cookies, and understandably so. These kids have already been through so much already, and so detectives made a friendly space corner, where both the boys could freely answer any questions without feeling any pressure. Detectives who were talking and bonding with Daniel at the time, of course, would eventually begin asking him questions on how the house fire was started, and his response and answers, they just might shock you. Now Daniel explained that he was woken up in the middle of the night by strange noises, and so he got out of bed and went to the bathroom, and on the way back from the bathroom, he saw a tall man dressed all in black wearing a ski mask, standing in the hallway. Daniel said he was terrified at this point, and that's when he noticed a hammer that was just left on the top step of the stairs. And realising his family was in danger, he knew it was down to him to defend the home and protect his family. Daniel ran to the hammer and picked it up and threw it as hard as he could, hitting the stranger in the back. The stranger was then hurt by the impact and started to panic, and that's when the stranger jumped straight out of the window, landing on the garden path before running off into the night. Daniel then mentioned that it was around this point in time he became very concerned and worried for his family, because he didn't know just how long this masked man was inside the house. And that's when Daniel ran into his brother's bedroom to make sure he was okay. Dominic was sleeping in bed and he was fine. He then said that he ran down the hallway to make sure that his mother was okay, but as he got closer to her room, he could smell something burning, and that's when he opened her bedroom door and saw his mother laying in the bed with the whole bed engulfed in flames. Daniel then told the detectives that there was no saving his mother as the flames were out of control, and that the only thing he could do now was protect himself and his little brother as well. And so he carried his little brother outside to safety and then went inside the house to save the family dog. And yeah, for now, that's all the police really had to go on. The police identified and then contacted the children's father, Adrian Bartlam, who claimed full-time sole carer and custody over both the children. And Jaqcci's would-be partner, Simon, he kindly offered to keep in touch. And just a couple of days later or so, a small team of forensic investigators swept through the Bartlam property, searching for any clues that could identify where and how the fire was started. And after just 4 hours or so, they were soon able to confirm that the fire was indeed started deliberately. Yeah, this wasn't no normal house fire caused by smoking in the bed or an overheated electric blanket. No. This was a deliberate house fire and fueled with an estimated 2 or 3 litres of petrol. Investigators also found in 2 separate parts of the house 2 different types of hammer. One was a common claw hammer found just inside Jaqcci's bedroom. And on a much closer inspection, it looked like the hammer had very small amounts of blood on the head and handle, and the other was a club hammer found near the upstairs window. And this hammer was believed to be the one that was thrown at the intruder by Daniel. And at the same time, as fire investigators continued to search for more clues, Jaqcci's lifeless body was undergoing a full autopsy, but because her body was so badly burnt, her identification was only possible through her private dental records. The autopsy clearly shows that there was no smoke inhalation damage or internal burns to the lungs and throat from the heat or fire, strongly indicating that Jaqcci was most likely dead before the fire was started. In fact, Jaqcci's cause of death was cold and barbaric, horrifying and brutal. Jaqcci was hit on the head with a metal claw hammer between 7 and 10 times. Her skull was cracked in so many different places, with skull fragments being pushed inwards, piercing the brain tissue, leaving open wounds so severe it would have been next to impossible for anyone to survive such a horrific attack. The police now believe whoever acted out this cold and ruthless brutal murder, they definitely didn't want to leave behind any incriminating evidence such as DNA or fingerprints, hair or fibres, and that once the killer knew Jaqcci was dead, they immediately started pouring petrol all over her bed and all over her body and even the walls, and then set fire to the body in an attempt to destroy all evidence. So now all the police have to do is identify who this masked intruder was. Now, at first the police believed that they were potentially dealing with a gone-wrong robbery, but now the police know this case is much more serious than originally anticipated. Everything young Daniel told the police earlier had more or less matched up. But what the police now had to ask was, why would anyone want to kill a kind woman who had no enemies, who was a loving and kind mother to 2 beautiful children? And this is where we see this murder investigation gain further publicity on the TV news. And it's fair to say by now, the hunt for Jaqcui Bartlam's killer was now on.
Will be completed later today. Police, crime scene investigators and also our fire investigation specialists are working together. Specially trained officers are working with their families, and we acknowledge it's a very, very distressing time.
The police assigned 25 officers to begin a door-to-door investigation on Georgia Drive, including local surrounding areas, all in the hopes that maybe someone or one of the neighbours saw something or someone. Important evidence, maybe unknowingly even. Or perhaps somebody saw a man dressed in black running down the road, or even driving a getaway car. I mean, it's just simple logic, right? Anyone who was outside walking down Georgia Drive in the early hours of the morning surely must have seen or heard something. And so police officers assigned to the case continued their door-to-door investigations. And that's when one of the police officers came across a local neighbour that remembers that dreadful night of events much differently to that of Daniel's. And what this neighbour told the police would move the entire investigation in a completely different direction altogether. It was around 1 AM when one of the neighbours recalls hearing a loud intensive argument coming from the Bartlam's house. And this arguing was between Daniel and Jaqcui. Daniel was screaming and shouting at his mother because she moved his trainers, and Daniel He couldn't find them, and so he was so angry and full of rage. Daniel actually came charging out the house into the backyard and kicked the shed door while screaming at Jaqcui. And because it was in the early hours of the morning, she told him to calm down and get ready for bed. And that's when the screaming and shouting stopped. However, just a little while later, the garden shed could be heard being unlocked, and then being opened. And then, shortly after, it was slammed shut. And just a short while later, the neighbour said he heard screams that appeared to be coming from Jaqcui's house. The neighbour told officers that he ignored the screams as he didn't take them seriously, because they would often fall out and have these huge family rows, and that he didn't want to get involved with any family feuds, fights or drama. The neighbour then went on to say, after all the screaming had stopped, he saw the house burning in flames, and that he saw Daniel, who was carrying Dominic out of the blazing house, and that Dominic was in his bedclothes as you would expect. But Daniel, he was fully dressed, with his hair gelled up and styled. The neighbour continued saying, I've watched that boy grow for years, and I've never seen that boy once make an effort to look clean, or to make himself smartly dressed. Come to think of it, I bet you that kid has never seen inside a bathtub for years. Now, the neighbour wasn't trying to be nasty or shame the boy in any way. He was actually telling the truth, because according to friends and family members, Daniel would often refuse to shower, wash or bath, and so his personal hygiene really was that poor. And now with this new information given, the police started to see Daniel not so much as a victim of circumstances, but more as a potential suspect. Could it be perfectly possible that Daniel, being so young, simply has just forgotten to tell the police certain information? Or could it be perfectly possible that Daniel knows much more than he's letting on? Well, the police felt the only way they could be sure was to invite Daniel back to the police station for a much more intense interview. And that's exactly what they did. And it was during the second interview Daniel was still maintaining his innocence and claiming that he was telling the truth, and that he had nothing to do with his mother's murder. And Daniel continued to stand by his original statement, saying that there was a strange man in their house who was dressed in black, who was wearing a ski mask, who unalived his mother and then set his house on fire. But the police could see that there were so many questions that were left unanswered, and that Daniel's story kept on changing, giving inconsistent answers. And so, just days after the police discovered Jaqcui's body, Daniel Bartlam was arrested on suspicion of killing his own mother. And the race against time started, as the police only had 72 hours to hold Daniel, whilst at the same time gather as much evidence as they possibly could in order to make a solid conviction. And in that time frame, that's exactly what the police did. They immediately seized his computer and tablet, and what the police found on both devices was extremely suspicious. Yeah, in his search history there were things like how to commit the perfect murder, how to commit murder, and get away with it. In fact, Daniel had spent hours upon hours reading specific articles online. Things like how to destroy a dead body without raising suspicion, and how to destroy clues at a crime scene such as DNA and fingerprints. The police also found on both devices hours upon hours of rewatched clips of people being murdered on TV shows like EastEnders, where the killer would often get away with their sinister crimes. In fact, Daniel was completely fascinated and obsessed with the perfect on-screen soap murder. He truly believed that if he was to set up and stage the perfect killing with enough help and tips from EastEnders, he too could commit the perfect murder and get away with it. So much so that Daniel decided he would actually write his very own screenplay, all based around the TV show EastEnders. However, in his TV screenplay, Daniel would introduce some extra characters to the show, and these characters added was of course a young man called Daniel Bartlam. He was clearly playing the role of himself, Jaqcui, who was playing the role as Daniel's mother, and Simon was her partner. And Daniel's twisted story screenplay went a little bit like this. Simon is sent away on a very important business trip. Daniel, the serial killer hell-bent on murdering his poor mother, takes full opportunity with Simon out the way. Daniel then sneaks into Jacquie's bedroom and repeatedly smacks her around the head with a hammer while she's sleeping, and then breaks into the garden shed and takes a canister of petrol. He then pours the petrol all over his mother's lifeless body. Daniel then takes a quick shower and changes his clothes in an attempt to remove any incriminating evidence, such as DNA. He then heads back to his mother's bedroom and then sets fire to her body. He then saved his young brother and the family dog from the burning down house in an attempt to bring more trust and depth to his character. The police come along and Daniel explains that he tackled the masked man in the house who started the fire and killed his mother. The killer gets away and is never seen again, and Daniel ends up being the local hero and fools the police and gets away with murder and then continues to carry on his life as normal. The end. 14-year-old Daniel Barton created this cruel and evil, sick and twisted screenplay, and then on the 25th of April in 2011, he carried out his sick and twisted fantasy, step by step, murdering his own mother as she lay sleeping in her bed. Daniel Barton really did believe, he truly believed that if he followed the steps of the screenplay, that he would have gotten away with murder. He believed his plan was bulletproof, and if he followed the plan and the script, step by step, nobody would have suspected him. But once the police found the screenplay on Daniel's computer, and once they discovered the integrated date and time of the file, the police finally had enough evidence to take the case to court. So Daniel was being held in a juvenile detention centre until his court hearing on the 9th of February in 2012. In court, Daniel's defence team tried to blame it on poor mental health, and on the grounds that Jaqcui was a neglectful mother, who showed very little emotional care and attention to Daniel, and that she would often beat him. Daniel's defence team also mentioned that Daniel would wipe his own feces after toileting on his bedsheet and curtains, and would often urinate over his toys as a cry out for help. The defence team also mentioned that, due to heavy neglect, EastEnders was Daniel's only sense of reality and connection with the world Daniel had, and therefore he should be tried for manslaughter rather than murder. However, during the trial, Adrian Bartlam and Simon Matters both gave their statements in court defending Jaqcui. Both men said that she was a wonderful and gentle mother, and that she was protective and kind, and that she loved and cared for her children fiercely. The psychotherapist was also involved in the courtroom drama, and after 3 weeks of spending time with Daniel, gave full reports to the court that Daniel was suffering with mild depression, but was 100% sane. And so, on the 2nd of April in the year of 2012, Daniel Bartlam, now aged 15 years old, was jailed and given a full life-term sentence with a minimum of 16 years to serve behind bars.
The circumstances of this crime are both shocking and difficult to comprehend. We now know that Daniel Bartlam planned to kill his mum. He then executed the killing in a violent attack on her, and then he took a number of steps to try and cover this up by both burning her body and then lying consistently throughout the police investigation. It was only after we spoke to other witnesses that we realised his account was not consistent, and he was then arrested. Following his arrest, we reviewed his computer and found that it deleted a story where a character called Daniel Bartlam killed his mother in exactly the same circumstances. As I've said, this is a shocking investigation and has shocked me personally, but the biggest impact is bound to be on Daniel's family, Daniel and Jacqueline's family. Having spent time with them throughout the investigation and the subsequent proceedings, It's fair to say that they probably never come to terms with what's happened to them. There's no evidence to suggest Jaqcui was anything other than a loving mum and loved and supported Daniel throughout his life.
And that brings us to the end of this YouTube script play, a script play that Daniel Bartlam could only wish he could rewrite. Hey there, so what's your take on this case? Why do you think Daniel Bartlam turned into a killer? Or maybe you believe he was just born plain evil? Whatever you believe, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you've enjoyed this week's content, then smash the like button. And as always, until next time, look after yourself and do stay safe. And I'll see you again real soon, the next time when evil follows. Bye.